Alright, in this video, I'm going to be giving you a bunch of tips and also tell you how I solo the Legend stages, both Stage 1 and Stage 2, in the newest Anime Adventures update. And I bet this will also work for Stage 3, depending on what the recommended units are. Now, the main thing you want to keep in mind during these stages is to listen to the recommended units. Like Stage 1, for example, it is physical units, so you want to use units that say physical. Like, don't make your main damage unit Yuno or Gojo or Yuto, because all of these units deal magic damage, which means the main final boss and a lot of the high health enemies will be taking significantly less damage than if you were to use like Ezra, Sukuna, or Asta. The same goes for Stage 2, which requires magic units. Don't be using Asta, Sukuna, or Ezra as your main damage, because yet again, the final boss and most of the high health enemies are gonna have defense against physical attacks. Which means, even though this unit right here has some insane damage, it's not gonna deal a lot of damage to the actual boss. You'll end up losing the round no matter how well you prepare your units. Think kind of like the ice units, but like not as bad, but still pretty bad. Now, the next tip I want to give you is building your team. Now, there's a couple different units you're going to want. You're going to want your main damage. I'm going to be setting up a physical team, for example. You're going to want your main damage, so find your highest damage physical unit. So that can be Asta, Yuto, or any other physical units you have, anything that has high damage. Especially high placement damage, so that way you can get through the early rounds a little bit easier. Especially if you're soloing. So bring a main damage unit. You're going to want to bring a stun unit. So you can bring like Gojo or Killua or any other unit that has stun. It does not matter if it's magical or physical, because you're mainly using this one as your stun unit, not a damage unit. You're not going to be putting any upgrades into this one to be dealing more damage. It's mainly going to be used for stunning. Now, for the third unit is you're going to want an air unit. Now, it doesn't matter, just like Gojo or any of your stun units, it does not matter if it is physical or the unit you need for the specific round. Just make sure it hits air. So you can bring like Yuno, you can bring Ezra, King Muram, or any unit that deals air damage. And the main reason why is because all the air units don't have defense. They only take more damage. So like, for example, the air units on the physical round will take more damage from Ezra because she's physical. But Yuno still deals enough damage to kill them. So you can bring whatever unit you want just to make sure it hits air. Now, the next thing you're going to want to bring is make sure to bring a money unit. I like to bring Bulma because it gives more money than Speedwagon. You can bring Speedwagon, though. It doesn't really matter. It's honestly up to how you want to play. But this tip I want to give you on the money unit is something just for general gameplay that I see a lot of players do wrong, is that if you're doing the upgrades, make sure you're going to actually make money long-term from the upgrades. So, for example, the last upgrade on Bulma gives an extra 2,000 cash, and it's 12.5k. Just doing basic math, that's going to take 7 rounds for you to make a little bit of profit. So if you're on wave 14, I wouldn't recommend doing that, because there's only 6 waves remaining. It's going to take 7 waves for profit. Overall, you're just going to lose money. And if you want to calculate that, just take the price of the upgrade and divide it by how much money the upgrade would give you, and if that number is higher than the remaining rounds, don't do the upgrade, because yet again, you'll end up losing money overall. It doesn't truly matter 100%, but if you want a little bit extra damage if you're struggling, make sure you do that right. Now, that's 4 units. You have 2 more slots, but that's the main things you need. You can go ahead and bring support units alongside. Like, if you want to bring another stun unit, I like to bring this unit for an extra 10% damage to any unit in the game. And if you also want to bring another support, you can either bring Erwin for physical units or Wendy for magic units, because they changed that in case you didn't know. So, like, Wendy isn't going to buff Astro, but it can buff Gojo. Same goes for Erwin. Erwin can buff Asta, and it cannot buff Gojo. But that is the main team that I would recommend setting up. This, for example, would be my physical team, and this would be my magic team. So I have my main damage and also air damage, which happens to be the exact same unit. We have the stun unit, we have the money unit, and the buff unit. Now, it can't really help too much on the placements. It'll entirely depend on what units you're using and what works out for you. But I can give some suggestions. Especially if you're working on your own, I'd recommend either defending right here if you have quite a bit of damage like I do. If you're lacking on damage, this circle is a bit better because as you can see, the total track, even on the base placement, is a lot better. And once it's upgraded, it should cover like all of this track without having to sell the unit and end up losing damage. You can even, if you want to, you can set up back here if you want to give yourself more time to upgrade money units before you start placing down damage units. The farther back you go, the more rounds it gives you just to purely dump into money units. Especially if you're lacking overall placement damage too. Now, if you are running with a group, I do know a lot of groups just try to stack up in the front, which entirely makes sense because it makes your damage higher in the leaderboard. I'll be honest, I kind of do the same thing despite knowing better for placing back here. But if you are doing that, I recommend doing something specific. Make sure to watch the back of the map because especially in the early rounds, unless you have a unique, stuff will be getting through. That's why I like placing over here because of the super large curve. Because even if you try to stack another damage up front every upgrade, make sure to, if stuff's getting super far past here, just place something down and spend like one wave of income on the unit. Don't sell it after because it's gonna do more sitting here than selling it for a fourth of the cost, especially if you don't have a lot of damage. But just leave the unit and just max the units you can place down in front. If you're willing to place up here, it's entirely up to you though. And also one last tip I can give for the rounds is that especially if you're using Gojo, specifically if you're using Gojo, if you're gonna use the mass stun, I think also Shanks does the exact same thing, just like a little bit weaker because it only does in the range. Make sure to, especially on the boss, not use the freeze until all of the allied units in the area are in range of it. Because if you freeze it like right before like a high damage unit in range, that can potentially cost the round or not. That and also just kind of slows everything down. So make sure everything's in range before you use the freeze, because there's no way, no matter how well users are placed, you can get 2 freezes off before the unit's out of range. Like, there's no way a boss can get frozen here and can get also frozen right here. It's just too fast. And the Gojo cooldown's too low. And also, as you can see, I am using a magic air unit, and the air units are physical. But if you have any questions, make sure to let me know down in the comments. Yet again, I'm not going to be able to help on unit placements exactly. It's going to be entirely up to you, trying to figure out what you are comfortable with and what works out for you on where to place units. And also, I'm not going to be able to help you on what units to use. It's also entirely up to you and how well stuff works out for your team, because all units are different.